Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our Fireside Chats. Today, we are joined with Billy Miller, who will be talking about his experience as a youth advocate. And Billy, if you'd like to introduce yourself, that'd be great.
All right, sure. So I'm Billy Miller. I'm from New York City. I'm currently pursuing acting, filmmaking, and music at NYU. And I would consider myself a youth advocate in terms of my own family's struggles with Lyme disease and trying to spread, the word about it, because it is not something that's very widely talked about, and how intense and how destructive and the number of people it really truly affects. So I really have been kind of talking about that for years through my own platform. And I mean, that's kind of just like an intro. I'm gonna go in later, but yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's very interesting that you have such a cause that you're so passionate about. I wanted to know, how did you get into music and the arts in general, and how has that shaped who you are as a person?
Right. So I basically after freshman year so in terms of music, I played violin when I was 5, starting when I was 5. And I played at this music school called the 3rd Street Music School. And I wasn't that into it. But then in high school, I was asked to leave my first high school because of academic problems. And I was forced to go to another school, which was definitely an experience with people from all different kind of walks of life. And there were people that just got out of jail. It was really eye-opening, and I needed something to delve all the emotions I was feeling into, and I started writing just lyrics and stuff, and it was honestly not even songs, but all of my friends around me were rapping a lot, so I thought I would write like that too, or write stuff like that. Sorry, and So I was into it then, and I started out just with the rapping stuff, and then I got way more. I started playing guitar. I wanted to learn guitar because I'm a big Beatles fan, and I wanted to be able to play the Beatles songs. And then I just started writing songs on guitar, and I kind of moved the direction of what kind of music I was doing. So now I kind of do both, and that's really how I got into music. And then I also found acting, and later on filmmaking. But that was really the reason that I really delved into that kind of art.
And I actually went to his former high school.
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Me and Billy have known each other for a long time, and it's been such a pleasure, and it really has been inspiring, and I've told him this many a time, to see him really thrive in this setting when it comes to the arts. And because of that, you've also been able to pair it with this advocacy. And I wanted to kind of ask, I know you had your album that came out last year in 2020, Overlooked Stories, and I wanted to know kind of the experiences behind that led to, because it's a very unique album, and if you want to kind of explain the creative process behind that, and then also at the tail end how that relates to the advocacy and how you intertwine those two in such a meaningful manner.
Yeah, so the kind of stuff I wanted to do, in terms of the rapping, let me think. So I wanted to I want to tell stories, right? That's the kind of music I want to make. I'm very interested in lyrics. I love telling stories. So I thought, growing up in New York, and this is actually kind of what I've been interested in the subject for a long time. And I just recently made this film about it that I'm editing now in post-production, but about, the kind of people you see on the street that you wouldn't look twice at, people either, homeless people or people that are kind of talking themselves delusional and whatnot, or the people that aren't talked about, because we live in a kind of society where certain issues are talked about very, very a lot for a second, and then we move past it and we kind of forget about it and we go on to the next thing. So who are the people that we never talk about, right? So the whole album is that kind of a theme mixed with the kind of angsty stuff that I was dealing with when I was a teenager. So it's kind of a mix of that. And the song kind of, the album opens with a song about someone who's homeless, and it's staring at the man across the street sprayed out on the curb. Hey, look, mom, it's a whole nother world. It's like, it's that theme of like someone seeing that and kind of coming to terms with it. And, you know, in the future, the thing about the album is it was my first one, and it's kind of more of a collection. Like in the future, I'm going to do stuff that's more like every song when it comes after the other, there's a reason, you know. It's kind of like I just thought what sounds best, and I put these. It's kind of more of like a mixtape collection-y kind of thing. But so I wasn't interested in making any money off it, and I thought that the best way to use it for good and to use it for something that is an overlooked story that has directly affected my family for so long was to, you know, use it to talk about Lyme disease. So I like, in the album's release, there was the album and then like the green ribbon of Lyme disease awareness, and like everything is being donated to the LDA. I think it was the Lyme Disease Association is the one that I picked, and you know, this is why, and a whole like barrage of things which I can also get into, and that's kind of how it aligns.
Yeah, wow. I am like very, very interested in like the entire concept of the album, because I'm also from New York City. I like totally relate to the experience of, you know, walking down the street and not even knowing the stories of like the people who are around you. And there's plenty of people who just don't get that attention, don't get really recognized at all or advocated for. And I love the message so much. It's really just very inspiring, and music is super powerful, and I love that you're able to share your messages and like give some sort of like attention and platform to people who are not thought about all the time, yet also in turn like raise awareness and like also get help for a cause that you're really passionate about. So I just think that's really amazing.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks. Yeah.
And just more specifically, why Lyme disease was so meaningful to you, if you mind kind of sharing that, and if that's something you're okay with.
No, I would love, that's, you know, I would love to. I mean, it's all I'm very good at oversharing with it because it's a really important thing. It's so my story is when I was about 9 or 10, the summer maybe going into 5th grade. So my backtracking, like my whole life, you know, my dad was like my mom too, but my dad was one of my biggest influences, obviously. You know, he taught me how to play baseball, you know, athletic guy, he's a thinker, you know, as like we can see here, he's a big thinker. And he's you know, he's a radical kind of this ideology. He thinks differently than other people. He doesn't consider himself on a specific political like sect. He just thinks about things differently. He teaches propaganda in American media. He's a very kind of devoted academic. So I see, and he was active. And then going into 5th grade or so, he started, you know, he said his feet or toes were numb and he felt a little foggy. And it just kind of got worse, and we didn't know why. And it went from his feet, and now it's all the way to his knees, kind of completely numb. It was mental fog. He very irritable, incredibly anxious, you know, really uncomfortable and sick all the time. Like I lost him, you know, and growing up, you are in denial about that kind of thing. And it's a weird in between, because it's a weird illness. It's like, you're not losing somebody. You know, obviously my dad, he's still, you know, kicking it and whatever, but it's like, he is not who he was. He was not who he was. He's actually getting a lot better now, which I'll talk about why. But it was a very painful thing that you don't really recognize as a kid. And then about 8.5 years later, so when I was 18, I'm 20 now, we saw this family friend who's a Lyme disease specialist in Maine, and they tested him, and they found the disease in his spinal fluid, which means it's very, very advanced. Now, it's not a matter of that no one ever tested for Lyme disease. He was tested twice, but it was negative both times. And it completely, now it's chronic. And on top of that, the CDC doesn't really consider chronic Lyme disease a separate thing from Lyme disease. You look up chronic Lyme disease, nothing will really come up, right? It's completely different, because when you catch Lyme disease early, it's different symptoms, different onset. When it's so heavily, you know, in your system, antibiotics don't really work. But it gets no attention. It gets virtually no attention. It's looked at as kind of a joke. And it's the fastest growing bacterial epidemic in the country. The CDC says that, you know, like 30,000 people get it a year. But Harvard Health put out, there was this huge paralysis conference on tick bite illnesses in like 2013. And they said it's upwards of 300,000 to 400,000 people suffer from it every year. So basically the tests themselves are not incredibly great. There's certain areas of the country where it's harder to get tested, or the certain tests aren't as good because they don't see that ticks are there as much. And like there's other things why the tests could be wrong, like, you know, the timing of the test, or immunity suppression, or your weakened immune system, or like patients that don't produce antibodies, so which is called like seronegative patients. So there's tons of reasons why it cannot, you know, be looked at, and it's not something that should be completely overlooked. Even if it was just my dad suffering, like I'd still be fighting for it, but it's not. It's hundreds of thousands of people, more than that, because there are people that don't know they have it and will never know they have it. And I didn't know what was going on. He'd be lying in my bed, curled up in like a fetal position. He could barely walk. He said that his feet felt like there was nails being driven through them 24/7. He could barely talk. I had to see him go to I had to see him cry. No one should see that, and no one has to grow up, you know, with the knowledge that not only is your parent sick and deteriorating, but that no one is talking about it, and they could be funding this more, and they could be learning more about this, and they're not. They're not, for whatever reason, they're not. And it's just like, and recently, finally, he's gotten better, because since Western medicine failed him because antibiotics don't really work, or the way most people do them don't really work, he went to Eastern medicine, and he met up with this guy who claimed, you know, it was basically phony, and it only made him worse. And then now finally he's seeing this new doctor. I'm blanking on his name, but he's like one of the best Lyme disease specialists. We had to like beg this guy, like beg for like a year to see this guy. Finally he's seeing him, and it's working, and he's much better. But these past 3 months I had to come home at like 10 o'clock because he couldn't be alone. So a friend of his would be here all day, and he's so anxious and can barely walk and shaking and all. It's one of the most traumatic things. So it's like on top of what I did after my album, because this was kind of before that, you know, he was still sick, but he wasn't this sick. This was just a reminder of how much this needs to be talked about, which is why I'm happy to be able to be doing it.
And Billy, that's powerful stuff. But I was just curious, in your own advocacy, how you were able to find the organization for overlooked stories to give the funds to, because you said you had some info on that.
Right. So there's a couple different organizations. There's the Lyme Disease Association. There's the Global Lyme Alliance. So I'm blanking on the others. I did the Lyme Disease Association because I thought that their website was the most thorough. They were talking about everything from, you know, the CDC's handling of it to, you know, whatever it is. And it's like, this is my thing, right? I'm less interested in, like, of course it's a great thing to be donating to organizations like that. People should. But I don't think that's the most important. I really don't believe that's the most important thing. I think the most important thing is to talk about it, and that's what I mostly do. And I was really talking about it last year after the album came out, and I plan on still doing it. Since this happened, it really kind of hit me hard, and I wasn't doing much. I was dealing with it so much that I didn't really have a lot of time to advocate for it. I was barely like on my phone, you know what I mean? Like I was like so messed up over it. And so I'm gonna plan on opening, like I'm gonna release stuff soon. When I release the film, I'm gonna be talking about it. Everything I do, I'm gonna talk about it. And I picked the Lyme Disease Association. I just felt it was the best website, and I just felt that they were honest. But I think that the most important thing is to be talking about it right now.
Billy, I do just have one question, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Interjecting. So you do seem to have a platform where you are able to, you know, speak your opinion on matters and have people listen to you. I was curious because so many of us, you know, we're looking to find that platform or building it. How are you able to build up that platform, if you don't mind? Because it is really interesting, because a lot of people are looking to grow their voice and be able to, you know, have an impact when they speak or when they post. So yeah. I was just curious about that.
Well, I kind of lucked out. I had a couple lucky breaks. I initially, my music kind of got me some following, and I was doing literally everything I could to get people to listen to it. So I would like comment, you remember this, I would like comment on rappers' posts. Like I looked really, it was not a good look. I'd be like, please listen to me. I was one of those people, right? Like I was like, whatever. So that was that, and then I got on this reality show, you kind of call it this YouTube show called Bestie Picks Bay. It's not it's so corny, right? But I got on it and I won it, right? And then after that, I got a following, and that was great, and I was able to do my music and stuff. And then I kind of built it through then, and then recently I put out a song with a friend of mine named Aryan, who's very famous in India. I put out this song, this kind of remix to Zach Knight mashup thing.
It's a song called "We Want to Boost It."
Can We Go Back? It's called Can We Go Back? And then since then I really grew in places like my following grew in like India and Indonesia and Pakistan. So great. It's a really great thing. And look, in terms of growing your audience, there's ways. On the internet, it's like you can do anything.
We understand that at ODAC, but yeah, go on.
Exactly. You guys completely get it. Like with Google ads, you can do it's just about money. That's all it's about. It's about getting money and raising money. As soon as you have the money, there's true ads that really work. So it's like if you look hard enough, there's a way to grow your platform. And then I started really focusing on Lyme disease after everything was kind of dying down. I wanted to, because this is just something that I'm incredibly passionate about. It's what I'm going to advocate for. It's just what I'm going to do. And when something else comes up, I'm going to advocate for that. When I see injustice, I'm going to do my best to talk about that too. But this is my main spiel. You know what I mean? This is like my main thing. So I was posting about it, and I had people swiping up, saying this doesn't matter compared to what's going on right now. It doesn't who cares about Lyme? Like really, like people saying that, even though I would post it, just insensitive. And I get it. People were angry, and there was something happening in this world that was incredibly unjust, and it was the mainstream thing that was going on. People are very upset about it. I was upset about it, but it goes against what activism is supposed to be, to say you can't talk about this because this is what's in the now. And it's incredibly hypocritical and contradictory to say you have to be talking about this now, knowing these people are not going to be talking about it in a couple months. It's going to forget. The next thing will happen, right? Which is how it goes. Yeah. That's how the kind of guilt consciousness goes.
It's the challenge of advocacy. When right. There are so many things you do want to talk about. I mean, and you chose to use your platform for Lyme disease, which I think anyone can say, is admirable, just like how we've, chosen to do our platform for organ donor awareness. So I think really that's just the issue. There's a lot of caveats, obviously, right. But
there's an issue, and there's a difference, I think, between like performative activism and actual activism. And it's a problem because it actually hurts the issues. It really does. When you have a bunch of people posting about one thing and then they completely forget about it and then go on to the next, And so if you look at any any really famous activist, right? Everyone knows MLK's name, right? He started talking about the Vietnam War shortly before he died. He was not just solely focused on what was going on here. He was opening up globally, just like Malcolm X was. As soon as he started doing that, that's when people, like the governments especially, really started going after him. So if you look at the people that were advocating for race issues, there's multiple things people can advocate for because there's so much injustice in the world, just like you said, Alex. So it's a fine line. I never understood the thought process of you can't talk about this right now. There's injustice everywhere, and especially with Lyme disease, this is something that affects millions of people over the course of every year, right? Millions. That's honestly what it is. If you add up everything, if you're considering how many people don't get tested and test positive, millions of people. It's not a small thing. This is the fastest growing bacterial epidemic in the country. It's a huge problem, and especially when I learned about that is when I really wanted to take it even further. Yeah. And it completely changed my life. It makes you grow up faster. It's one of those things where no one gets it when a parent is ill, unless you've had it. And it was even more confusing because there's not as much knowledge about the disease. It's not, thank God it's not terminal, but I don't really know what's going on, you know, and I don't know how to handle it. I don't know. There's no kind of, it's not as talked about, and it affects so many people. When you look into how it affects so many people, why aren't they doing anything about it? Why is nobody doing anything about it? Because it's not a mainstream issue. It's not a mainstream thing. And as soon as something is not a mainstream issue, people will not talk about it, which is why you have to discuss it. In terms of organ donation, as you guys, the whole platform is based on that. That's not a mainstream thing. That's not something people think about. That's not something they can think they can really help people. They can really assist the greater good of, you know, humanity with this, with the kind of something they should easily do. No one's thinking about
where we step in to educate.
Right.
I know. Me and Dea have discussed, and she can take over after me. Just the trying to figure out how to get people to really care about this, you know, and that's a struggle. All of us as, you know, young activists, not only trying to get our opinions out, but also trying to find our own voice.
Right.
It's something we all come to terms with.
Yeah. And the thing about like organ donation specifically is like part of why our mission is so focused on raising awareness is because, especially with younger people, they don't really think about being an organ donor. They don't think about transplant because it doesn't always like have to do with them. Like if they don't come across it in their life, then they're not thinking about it. Then they don't really consider like, should I be an organ donor? Like, can I worry about it later? And like part of what makes it so important for us to like continue to speak out about it is because like when you really like look into it, organ donation is so crucial to our healthcare system. It affects people regardless of race, religion, identity. Like it affects anybody. Like anybody at any point who is struggling with a health issue could be in need of an organ transplant. And so it's one of those things that younger people just don't really think about because they don't think it'll happen to them, because not that many young people need organ transplants, and they think they can like put it off until later on in life. But you know, part of why we're working so hard at this time is because people don't really understand that like it could impact you at any point in your life, and you have to be in a position where you're prepared, and you have to understand like how important transplant is in order to make sure that people are healthy. And it's hard when it's not something that's discussed with young people, and it's difficult when it's not something that's discussed by mainstream media as well, like what you were saying. But you know, part of being an activist for us, and also for you, as you've shared with us, is like no matter who's talking about it or not talking about it, like you have to just keep going. You have to just keep talking and keep putting it out there and keep raising awareness, because if you don't, like who else will?
I completely agree. I mean, it's the thing of, it's not talked about among youth, or it's not talked about among mainstream media, and then when something else is going on, you can get attacked for not discussing the proper thing. And you have to find whatever kind of balance, but especially if you're with an organization that's dedicated to one specific fight. I mean, you're only human. You can only talk about like one thing. I'm one person. You know, I'll do my best, but if I'm focused on something, it's like I think I did my best at the time. You know, I think that I still was talking about what was going on and spreading and showing whatever following I had. You know, what is going on, and multiple kind of not the stupid infographics, but just like what my interpretation of it all, and infographics based on actual fact. And then I delved into what I've been planning on discussing. And because it wasn't something that was, you know, in the now, and people were so upset, they couldn't really hear it. But I just had to, you know, you just got to keep talking about it. You just got to keep talking about it, because I know that no matter what people think about it, I know no matter what people's, you know, pre-convictions of what the disease are, hundreds of thousands of people are suffering from it, and they will continue to suffer from it unless people do something about it. And it's unjust. And along the way, we can do our best to you know, talk about everything that needs to be talked about. But again, we're only human, and we just have to do our best. And especially, you have to fight it harder when things are not in the mainstream. You know what I mean? It's like when things are in the mainstream, there's a little bit of comfort. There's comfort in the fact that with those riots, there was a lot of coverage, and a lot of people were really upset, and a lot of people were fighting. It's very comforting to see people coming out and supporting and coming against something that was inhumane. And then it's that much harder when people don't really care. It's that much harder when people don't really care about something like organ donation, which can help so many families, so many people. It's the basis of how to treat so many different things. And if you haven't dealt with it, or if you haven't been, kind of like moved by it, people are not going to discuss it. And it's this, I think it's the same kind of thing with Lyme disease, which is kind of like a few jokes about it, because it's from a tick, and, whatever the cause, it's so destructive. Like I like words can't express what it's like to see that as a child. Words can't express what it's like for him. The quality of life for someone with Lyme disease is very, very low, very low. People are miserable. I was, my dad was trying to figure out what was going on these past months, and I went to see this woman who was suffering with Lyme disease, who was insisting that like Kanga water would really help him, and maybe it kind of helped, but it's one of those things that people will think will help. I think, but it definitely helped a little. Whatever, it doesn't matter. I went to see her, and I got there, and it was like she was she just, I'm trying to describe it. She just looked awful, like looked miserable, looked ill, sick, upset. It's not only that people are sick, it's that they have to fight to get treated. It costs money if it is not covered by insurance. People have to fight to treat it. You can't be sick and fight at the same time. She didn't really have a family. She was, bags under her eyes. She was low, and she was, trying to give me this water. It was awful. It was awful to see, and I saw that in my own dad. And can people just like be sick and get the help they need? People should not be sick and then have to fight to get their illness heard, and that's kind of what the basis of the whole thing is.
Yeah, and that's why I feel like it's really up to us to fight for them, for people who can't fight for themselves. Part of what we do is to make sure that we advocate for them, because sometimes people cannot help themselves. It's really difficult to be sick and to fight for your cause and your illness and what you're going through. So yeah, it's completely true.
And sometimes it even, you have to take, some means, you wouldn't normally use. I know me and Daya wouldn't usually be using TikTok, but right. This month we've been doing the under a minute challenge for ODAC, just to raise awareness. That challenge we have on TikTok, that it's been getting shared quite a bit.
Right, well, you're trying to get it in the what people are using. You gotta do what you gotta do. Good for you. Good, that's great. I saw that. It's a great idea. You have to, things evolve, like what people do evolves, and you gotta go around that, especially if it's with an organization, especially if it's with a group. It's a little different for me, because like I'm just a person, and like I like, my focus is on, like my art and stuff, but I want to use that. I'm using that to spread awareness to this issue. So it's a combination, and it's, I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great idea what you guys are doing with the whole month and taking people in. So much of advocacy nowadays is very divisive. I feel like a lot. I hear a lot of people. It's like it's the kind of advocacy where if other people don't agree, it's like tension rather than trying to pull more people towards the issue. And emotions have to do with that, and it's understandable with a lot of things, and I know exactly like the response of what you have to think about, all the pain and stuff, of course, but the biggest thing in getting an issue more and more heard is to get more people, to fight for it, and more people on to see the way you're thinking, to fight for whatever issue it may be. Advocacy is about unification, and too much nowadays it's about division. Mm-hmm. And it's about size and whatnot, rather than just coming together. And when someone says something like that, they usually kind of get attacked, and it's like, well, you can't, like, you got to understand, whatever emotion, like you there's a lot of things going into that, and of course, but at the root of it all, logically, the fight is about getting the most people to see what's right and getting everyone on your side.
So we just wanted to say thank you Billy, for joining us to talk about advocacy. I think you brought up some really fantastic points about being an advocate, but also specifically being an advocate as a young person in today's world, and especially with the use of social media and how important it is. So we really just appreciate you joining us today. And thank you for your words.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for your truth. We really did appreciate it. And it was a lot to think about. So it was a good discussion. You know, it's a good discussion when there's a lot to think about after.
Right. And thank you guys for doing what you're doing. I'm right there with you.